Good evening, Jessica Van Vonderen with ABC News. Continued lockdowns and growing COVID-19 cases down south have seen an influx of people moving to Queensland, placing huge pressure on our quarantine hotels. That's prompted the Premier to declare a 2-week freeze on hotspot arrivals. And the military has now arrived to help police monitoring the border. Let's go live to Matt Wordsworth at Qld. Matt, what's it like there on the border checkpoint?
Jess, it's just so quiet. Around this checkpoint behind me, we're surrounded by high-rises, 15 to 20 stories tall, but you look up into them and there's just a smattering of lights on. You talk to businesses around here and it's just dire. There's a restaurant just down here. It was open from 11 to midnight before all this. Now it's 5:30 to 7:30. Staff cut from 20 to 7. The owner is fencing in Normanton to raise money. He's in his 60s. The pizza shop across the road, it was open 11 to 11. Now it's 4 till 9. Business has been cut 70 to 80%. And the convenience store, well, they told us, we're not the problem. We're not a hotspot, but we're paying the price more than anyone. And so you get the sense that the business support grants that are being offered are just not going to cut it. And while Qld is a ghost town, the state, well, it's been flooded elsewhere. Talissa Saganto reports.
All packed up and ready to go.
It is a bit devastating. I was just in the middle of packing this morning, essentially, for my plane tomorrow.
The 31-year-old was due to fly to Brisbane in the morning, leaving New South Wales for good. But his plans were shattered when the Premier revealed she's placing a temporary halt on all travellers from declared hotspots.
Queensland is being loved to death. We simply just do not have any room at the moment.
An influx of people wanting to relocate, desperately trying to flee lockdown southern states, is being blamed for putting an unsustainable strain on our quarantine system.
The numbers of hotels that were being brought online with very, very little notice, we just couldn't continue that.
We are scrambling for hotels. And this has got to stop. It's too much pressure, so we have to put a pause.
There are more than 5,000 people holed up in 22 quarantine hotels scattered across Queensland. More than 60% of those are people who've moved here permanently. To alleviate the surge in numbers, for the next 2 weeks, no one from Victoria, New South Wales or the ACT will be allowed into the state, including returning Queensland residents, unless they've been granted an exemption. They will also have to reapply for their border pass and book a place in hotel quarantine.
This will help us manage room capacity much better by knowing how many people are arriving and when, so we can make sure there's a room allocated to them.
As for overseas arrivals coming into hotel quarantine, there'll be no changes to those numbers, which are currently capped at 50%. But the Premier says they are saving space for emergency evacuees who are due to arrive from Afghanistan.
We're getting calls about needing extra capacity to cope with that. So we're just being stretched. We're just being stretched to the limit.
Queensland recorded no new cases overnight, and the 2 truck drivers thought to be infectious yesterday don't have the virus. Still, officials are ramping up protection. Border changes were rolled out as reinforcements rolled in. 120 ADF personnel will be stationed at 12 locations, including the Gold Coast and other regional checkpoints, helping bolster the state's defence against Delta. Talissa Saganto, ABC News, Brisbane.
Businesses on the Queensland-New South Wales border are on the brink as they grapple with the toughest border closures since the pandemic began. They're trying to find ways to stay afloat and support the community while abiding by the restrictions.
An exchange at the border where blockades split these coastal towns. Now a necessary stop for many business owners in the fight to keep their companies afloat and community spirits high.
You've got to do what you can do, keep the business running, otherwise shut shop and go home.
The intersection of Bay Street has become a meeting point with everything from tools, equipment and food to pathology samples passed across. It's a situation Burleigh-based waterproofer Steve Evans never imagined in his 20 years of trade. 4 of his 10 staff are stuck in lockdown on the New South Wales side.
Before the COVID, I don't think you think about the borders being closed. It's just normally you go from one state to the other state without even thinking about it.
2 hairdressers on different sides of the border were once competitors, but now they're swapping staff members and stock to stay open.
You just got to adapt to what's happening around you and think outside the box and try not to get so down on what's happening.
The restrictions are now even tougher than they were last year.
This time it's certainly worse than last time.
Savings are drying up, and Coolangatta Surf Club manager Steve Edgar says many businesses feel like their backs are against the wall.
Qld is almost like a ghost town at the moment. It really is it's a disaster. It really is. The town is in a lot of trouble. People at breaking point.
Further north, there's a major chink in the production chain at a Burleigh fashion label, with staff locked out of the state.
Which means that our cutting in-house has come to a halt.
Co-founder Lena Broughton has moved business meetings online, but the border closure is also putting a divide in her personal life.
My partner lives on the other side of the border, so I guess we've gone from living together and cohabitating to then being split by a border, literally with no defined date of when that will change.
A Coolangatta yoga studio has lost more than 60% of its clients, but it's offering discounted classes and meditation for stressed out border residents.
People to come to and kind of just calm their nervous system.
Queensland Health says the border restrictions could be in place for another 10 weeks, with the hope that 70% of people will be fully vaccinated by then. In the meantime, businesses here will keep looking for ways to survive. Heidi Sheehan, ABC News, Gold Coast.
Acting Chief, thanks for your time. Can I just ask you about this situation around the corner here? We've got people walking up to the border from each side. It's a pretty sad reunion of family members and some people just trying to keep their businesses going. Are they doing anything wrong?
No, if they're staying on their side of the border, that's fine. The Chief Health Officer has the intention, obviously, to keeping Queenslanders safe, and that really means that whilst we're in a difficult position at the moment with the borders being closed to New South Wales and other jurisdictions, this is not going to be forever. So we just have to work through this little period of time.
And you're happy for them to pass goods across the border?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We understand that there's issues such as child custody transfers being completed at the border. So as long as people themselves aren't transiting backwards and forwards across the border, that's okay at this point in time.
And what about policing operations? I understand that there are some routine jobs that you can't do now across the border. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, obviously for us, you're exactly right. There are investigations at different levels that occur in the organisation. More serious and investigations, such as murders, etc., will always be prosecuted and investigated appropriately. It's more around the level of permission to travel into other jurisdictions at this point in time. So currently that permission sits with the Commissioner, and the Commissioner will make an individual decision based on the circumstances before allowing officers to leave Queensland.
So there are some lower level crimes that you just had to hit pause on?
That's correct. At this point in time, it's all about public safety, and we don't want to put the community at risk by putting our officers, sending them into a hot zone to complete an investigation that can wait a little bit longer until everyone's safe, and then have the officers return and possibly transfer the virus. We don't want that at all. So, yeah, we'll just put things on hold at this point.
So I understand there are plans afoot for more anti-lockdown protests this weekend. What's your tolerance this time around?
Yeah, for us, obviously, our plan is to primarily act on the Chief Health Officer's direction, and that's, again, around keeping people safe. But obviously the plan will also entail making sure that the broader community is safe. So the tolerance around antisocial behaviour will obviously be one of those key triggers for us to change our position in relation to how we react to these situations. On Sunday, the protest, whilst vocal, was largely peaceful. There was only one arrest on our side, and obviously a number of arrests on the New South Wales side, but it's a greater risk around the community, and we just don't want to transfer the virus. We've worked so hard to get to this stage, 18 months. We don't want to put the community at risk by bringing that undone at this late stage.
So all the police who are at the border here have to get vaccinated. You've got some officers that we've already reported on who have elected to take leave instead of get vaccinated. Do you think all Queensland police should get the COVID vaccine?
Look, it's an organisational decision, and we'll be taking advice from the Chief Health Officer and ultimately the Commissioner, and our State Disaster Coordinator, Deputy Commissioner Steve Golchevsky, will make that call.